The snow fell in silence, thick and relentless, blanketing Chicago's streets in a hush that felt almost sacred. Christmas lights blinked from storefronts and lampposts, casting fractured colors across the frozen sidewalks. But the cheer they promised felt distant, a song from another room meant for other people. It was 11:47 on Christmas Eve, and the temperature had dropped to -8 degrees. The kind of cold that turned breath into ghosts and made bones ache with every step. Nathan Cordell stood outside the Four Seasons Hotel, the gala's warmth still clinging to his tailored Brioni suit. He loosened his tie, flipped up the collar of his overcoat, and let the winter air bite at his face. Behind him, the ballroom still hummed with laughter and champagne toasts, but he'd walked out 15 minutes early. Something he never did. The evening had been a performance: handshakes with investors, posed photographs with the mayor, a brief speech about Heartland Restaurant Group's $92 million in revenue and 40% growth. Everyone had applauded. He'd smiled. Inside he'd felt nothing. The city glowed around him, electric and alive. But Nathan felt like a visitor in his own life. 38 years old, self-made millionaire by 30, CEO of 12 successful restaurants across the Midwest, featured in Forbes, respected in boardrooms. And completely, utterly alone. His penthouse on the 64th floor of Trump Tower was waiting 3,000 square feet of floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that cost more than most people earned in a year. No Christmas tree, no family. Just silence and spreadsheets and the echo of his own footsteps. He started walking, not toward home, but away from it, needing the cold to clear his head. Michigan Avenue stretched before him, decorated in bright couples passing arm in arm. Their laughter carried on the wind. He turned down a quieter street, let his feet choose the path, and found himself approaching Washington Park. The snow was untouched here, pristine and deep, and the lampposts flickered like uncertain stars. That's when he saw them. A woman and a child, silhouettes beneath a streetlight at the far edge of the park. They sat on a bench close together, the woman's thin jacket wrapped around both of them. A backpack rested at her feet, a plastic bag beside it with something small and worn poking out the top, a stuffed animal maybe. The boy was small, 5 or 6, his legs swinging above the snow-covered ground. The woman held him tight, her breath visible in the freezing air. Her head bent low as if she were singing or praying or simply trying to will warmth into being. Nathan slowed. Something about the scene pulled at him, a recognition he couldn't name. He moved closer, careful not to startle them, his shoes crunching softly in the snow. The woman was humming, he could hear it now, faint and fragile. Claire de Lune. The melody threaded through the cold, each note deliberate and aching, and Nathan stopped 30 feet away, hidden in the shadow of a bare oak tree. The boy shifted, pressing closer to his mother. His voice was small, muffled by her coat. "Mommy, I'm cold." "I know, baby, close your eyes. Imagine we're at the beach, feel the warm sun." The boy tried. Nathan could see the effort in the way he squeezed his eyes shut, in the way his small hands gripped his mother's sleeve. But after a moment he opened them again and his voice cracked. "I can't feel it." "Try harder, sweetheart, for Mommy." Nathan's throat tightened. 3 years ago, that had been him, not homeless, not freezing in a park, but just as broken. His wife Victoria had left on Christmas Eve, her final words still etched into his memory. "You married your work, not me. I can't compete with spreadsheets." She'd walked out of the penthouse and Nathan had sat alone in the nursery. He'd never had a reason to build, surrounded by success that suddenly meant nothing. He'd had money, power, respect, but no one to come home to, no one to hold. The boy on the bench slipped down, his feet hitting the snow, and he looked up at his mother with wide, serious eyes. "Mommy, if we don't have a house, how will Santa find us?" The woman's face crumpled for just a second, a flash of pain so raw that Nathan felt it in his chest, but she smoothed it away, forced a smile, and cupped the boy's cheek with a hand that trembled. Santa always finds kind hearts, baby, always. The boy seemed to consider this, his breath puffing out in small clouds. Then he turned and his gaze landed on Nathan. For a moment they just stared at each other across the snow-covered park. This small child with hope still in his eyes, and this man who'd forgotten what hope looked like. Then the boy's face brightened, and before his mother could stop him, he pulled away and ran toward Nathan, his boots kicking up powder as he went. Mister! Nathan's heart lurched. He stepped forward instinctively, and the boy skidded to a stop in front of him, tilting his head all the way back to look up. The woman, his mother, was already on her feet, calling out in a voice tight with embarrassment and fear. Benny, don't bother people. But the boy ignored her, his attention fixed on Nathan with an intensity that was almost unsettling. Up close, Nathan could see the flush in his cheeks from the cold, the way his jacket was too thin for this weather, the small gap where he'd lost a front tooth. The boy's hands were red and chapped, but he clasped them together like he was making a wish. Sir, you look important. Can you tell Santa we moved? He might get lost. Nathan crouched down, his knees hitting the frozen ground so he was eye level with the child. The cold seeped through his expensive suit, but he didn't move. What's your name, son? Bennett Sullivan. But everybody calls me Benny. I'm 5. The boy pointed back toward the bench. That's my mom, Harper. We're temporarily without a home, but she says it's a plot twist, not the ending. The woman Harper reached them, breathing hard, and grabbed Benny's hand. Up close, Nathan could see her more clearly, late 20s blonde hair tied back in a messy bun. Dark circles under her eyes, a jacket that was meant for autumn, not this brutal winter. Her face was pale, her lips almost blue, but her chin was lifted, her gaze direct and unapologetic. She wasn't begging. She wasn't crying. She was just there holding on. I'm sorry. He shouldn't have. Nathan stood, and for a moment they just looked at each other. He saw pride in her expression, the kind that came from refusing to break even when everything else had already shattered. He saw exhaustion, fear, determination. He saw himself 3 years ago sitting in that empty penthouse wondering how he'd ended up with everything and nothing all at once. It's okay, Nathan heard himself say. His voice came out rougher than he intended. I'm Nathan. Harper's jaw tightened. She nodded once, a sharp defensive movement, and started to turn away, pulling Benny with her. We're fine. Thank you. But Nathan spoke again before he could stop himself. It's -8 degrees and it's Christmas Eve. Harper stopped. She didn't turn back, but her shoulders went rigid and her hand tightened on Benny's. We'll figure it out. I'm sure you will. You look like someone who figures things out. Nathan paused, weighing his next words. But tonight maybe you don't have to do it alone. That made her turn. Her eyes were hazel, he noticed, green and gold and guarded. They searched his face, looking for the catch, the angle, the hidden cost. Nathan kept his expression neutral, open. He didn't know why this mattered so much, why he couldn't just walk away. He only knew that if he left them here in the snow on Christmas Eve, he'd never forgive himself. Why do you care? Harper's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. You don't know us. Nathan exhaled and his breath fogged in the air between them. No, but I know what it's like to pretend you're fine when you're breaking inside. The words hung there raw and unexpected. Harper blinked, and for just a second her guard dropped. Nathan saw the exhaustion beneath the weight she'd been carrying for far too long. He saw a woman who'd been strong because she had no choice, who'd smiled for her son even when the world was collapsing. He saw someone worth saving, or maybe someone who could save him. Benny tugged on Nathan's coat sleeve, his small voice cutting through the tension. Do you have kids, mister? Nathan looked down at the boy and something in his chest cracked. No, I don't. Benny nodded seriously like this was important information. That's okay. You can still help. My mom says helping is what good people do. Harper's face flushed and she started to pull Benny back again, murmuring apologies. But Nathan shook his head. Your mom's right. He straightened, addressing Harper directly. There's a motel 2 blocks from here. Riverside Inn. It's clean, safe, and warm. Let me get you a room just for tonight. I can't. You can, and you will. Because tomorrow is Christmas and your son deserves to wake up somewhere warm. Harper's hands clenched at her sides. Nathan could see the war playing out on her face, pride versus desperation, independence versus survival. He waited, giving her the space to choose, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Fine, but I pay you back. Every cent. I don't do charity. Nathan wanted to argue to tell her it didn't matter, but he saw the way her spine straightened when she said it, the way her shoulders squared. This wasn't about money, this was about dignity. And he understood that. Keep a tab, he said simply. We'll settle it later. Harper nodded once, sharp and decisive, and looked down at Benny. Get your things, baby. As they gathered their meager belongings, the backpack, the plastic bag, a threadbare blanket, Nathan pulled out his phone and called the Riverside Inn. The front desk answered on the 3rd ring, and he recognized the voice, Nancy, the night clerk, a woman in her 50s who'd worked there for 20 years and never forgot a face. Nathan Cordell, I need a room, 2 beds, 3 nights. Nancy didn't ask questions. She'd seen Nathan donate to the motel's homeless outreach program, had watched him quietly pay for rooms when people came up short. She just said, Room 14. It's ready whenever they arrive. Nathan ended the call and looked up to find Harper watching him. Benny clutching her hand. The boy's eyes were heavy with exhaustion, his earlier energy fading fast. Harper's expression was unreadable, somewhere between gratitude and suspicion, relief and fear. Nathan gestured toward the street. It's this way. They walked in silence, the snow crunching beneath their feet. Nathan kept his pace slow, matching Benny's shorter strides, and Harper stayed close to her son, one hand on his shoulder. The city was quieter now, most people inside with their families, and the only sounds were their footsteps and the distant hum of traffic. Nathan glanced at Harper, once saw the way she held herself back straight, chin up, eyes forward, and felt a surge of respect. She wasn't broken. She was bending under an impossible weight, but she hadn't snapped. The Riverside Inn appeared ahead, its neon sign flickering in the darkness. It wasn't fancy, 2 stories, worn brick, a small parking lot with 3 cars. But it was clean and safe, and right now, that was all that mattered. Nathan held the door open, and Harper hesitated for just a moment before stepping inside, Benny at her side. Nancy looked up from the front desk, her expression warming when she saw them. She was a kind woman, the type who kept cookies behind the counter for kids and blankets in the storage closet for nights like this. She glanced at Nathan, then at Harper and Benny, and her eyes softened. Room 14, 2nd floor, end of the hall, extra towels in the bathroom. She slid a key across the counter, then reached below and pulled out a paper bag. And I set aside some snacks, milk cookies, a couple of bananas in case anyone gets hungry. Harper's throat worked as she swallowed hard. She took the key with a shaking hand and whispered something that might have been, "Thank you." Benny beamed at Nancy, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "Cookies, Mommy, there's cookies." Nancy smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Of course, sweetheart. Can't have Christmas Eve without cookies." Nathan stepped back, giving them space, but Harper turned to him before heading toward the stairs. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, her voice thick. "I don't know why you're doing this, but thank you." Nathan met her gaze, and for a moment he felt something shift inside him. something that had been frozen for 2 years slowly beginning to thaw. "Get some rest. We can talk tomorrow." Harper nodded, then guided Benny toward the stairs. The boy waved over his shoulder, his small hand flapping in the air, and Nathan raised his own hand in response. He waited until they disappeared down the hallway until he heard the faint click of a door closing before he turned back to Nancy. "Put it on my account. Whatever they need." Nancy smiled gently. "Already done, Mr. Cordell." Nathan left the motel and stepped back into the cold. The snow was still falling softer now, and the city felt hushed and holy. He should have been heading home, back to his penthouse, back to the life he'd built. But instead, he found himself walking slowly, his mind replaying the last hour. The boy's question about Santa, Harper's fierce pride, the way she'd hummed Claire de Lune to her son, trying to create warmth where there was none. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a text from Preston Aldridge, his CFO and one of the few people he trusted. How was the gala investors happy? Nathan stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Left early. Had something more important to do. Preston's response came quickly. You leaving early? Are you feeling okay? Nathan almost smiled. Yeah, I think I am. He pocketed his phone and kept walking, his thoughts turning to the woman and child now safe in room 14. He didn't know what would happen next, didn't have a plan or a strategy. He only knew that for the first time in 2 years, he'd done something that felt real, something that mattered. By the time Nathan reached his building, it was nearly 1 a.m. The lobby was empty, the doorman nodding as he passed, and the elevator ride to the 64th floor felt longer than usual. His penthouse was exactly as he'd left it, cold, impersonal, expensive. He shrugged off his coat, loosened his tie, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Chicago spread out before him, a glittering maze of lights and lives, and somewhere out there Harper and Benny were sleeping in a warm bed for the first time in who knew how long. Nathan pulled out his phone again and opened his laptop instead, the blue light harsh in the darkness. He logged into the company's HR system, something he rarely did, and typed in a name, Harper Sullivan. The file that appeared was sparse, hired 14 months ago, server at Rosewood Diner, performance rating 4.9 out of 5, perfect attendance until today. Emergency contact, Margaret Callahan, coworker. Previous address listed, but there was a note attached, flagged in red, eviction notice received, forwarded to payroll. Nathan's jaw tightened. He clicked on the attachment and read the scanned document. 2 months unpaid rent totaling $2,100. Landlord Frank Calloway had issued final notice on December 10th. She'd had 2 weeks to figure it out, and she hadn't. Because she was a single mother working minimum wage, trying to survive on an income that didn't cover rent and food and medical bills and everything else life demanded. He closed the laptop and sat in the darkness, his mind working. Harper would hate what he was about to do. She'd fight it, argue against it, insist on paying him back. But Nathan had spent 2 years running a company, making decisions that affected hundreds of employees, balancing profit with principle. He knew how to solve problems, and this was a problem he could actually fix. He picked up his phone and sent an email to the head of HR, effective immediately, implement emergency support fund for all single-parent employees. Details to follow in January, authorize up to $50,000 annually. Run it by legal, then make it policy. The response came within minutes. HR worked late during the holidays preparing bonuses and year-end reports. Noted. We'll draft proposal for board approval. Nathan typed back, no board approval needed. CEO discretion. Do it. He hit send and set the phone down, then leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Victoria's voice echoed in his memory, her final accusation. You care more about your empire than your life. Maybe she'd been right. But maybe, just maybe, he was finally learning how to care about both. Across the city in room 14 of the Riverside Inn, Harper Sullivan sat by the window long after Benny had fallen asleep. She'd tucked him into one of the twin beds, wrapped him in the blanket they'd carried from the apartment, and watched his small chest rise and fall with each breath. He looked peaceful, safe. And for the first time in weeks, Harper let herself feel the full weight of what had almost happened tonight. They could have frozen. They could have ended up in a shelter, separated, Benny terrified and Harper helpless to protect him. They could have. She pressed her hands to her face and breathed slowly, forcing the panic down. They were okay. They were warm. They had 3 nights here, 3 nights to figure out the next step. And they had Nathan Cordell to thank for it. Harper didn't know what to make of him. He was wealthy, that much was obvious from the tailored suit, the confident way he'd handled everything. The fact that he could book a motel room without even asking the price, but he hadn't been condescending. He hadn't pitied her. He'd just helped. And that was almost harder to accept than cruelty would have been. She stood and walked to the small table where Nancy had left the bag of food. Inside were 2 sandwiches wrapped in plastic, 2 bottles of water, an apple, and a small carton of milk. Beneath them, folded neatly, was a handwritten note on Riverside Inn stationery. Harper unfolded it, her fingers trembling slightly, and read, "For tomorrow's journey, wherever it leads. Motel paid through December 27th. No debt. No obligation, just one human helping another." Nathan Harper's throat closed. She read the note 3 times, her eyes blurring, and then she carefully folded it and slipped it into her pocket. No debt. But that wasn't true, and they both knew it. She owed him $267 for the room, plus whatever this food cost. She'd repay it, every cent. Because accepting charity meant admitting she couldn't do this alone, and Harper had been alone for 6 years. She'd learned to survive without help, without hope, without anything but sheer stubborn will. But tonight, just for tonight, she let herself be grateful. She pulled a notepad from her backpack, one of the few things she'd kept a relic from her Berkeley days, and found a pen. Her handwriting was shakier than usual, exhaustion making her hand tremble, but she wrote carefully, "Mr. Cordell, I will repay $267 room plus $25 estimated food equals $280. You will receive payment. Debt doesn't disappear just because kindness delivers it. Thank you for your help. Harper Sullivan." She folded the note, slipped it under the door, and hoped Nancy would pass it along. Then she returned to the window and stared out at the falling snow, her mind churning. What happened after December 27th? Where would they go? How would she? Benny stirred in his sleep, murmuring something she couldn't hear. And Harper forced the questions away, one day at a time. That's how she'd survived this long. One shift, one meal, one breath at a time. Tomorrow she'd figure out the next step. Tonight she'd just be grateful they were warm. Across town, Nathan was still awake, staring at the city lights, thinking about a boy who believed in Santa and a woman who believed in paying her debts. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't have a plan. He only knew that something had shifted tonight, something fundamental and irreversible. For 2 years, he'd been going through the motions, building his empire, attending galas, smiling for cameras, but feeling nothing. Tonight, crouched in the snow with a 5-year-old boy asking him to tell Santa they'd moved. Nathan had felt something crack open inside him. A door he'd locked after Victoria left a part of himself he'd buried beneath spreadsheets and board meetings and the relentless pursuit of more. He thought about Harper's face when she'd agreed to take the room, the way her pride had warred with her desperation. The way she'd looked at him like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve. He thought about Benny's gap-toothed grin, the way he'd waved goodbye with such trust, such openness. and he thought about the woman who'd raised a child to still believe in kindness even when the world had given her every reason not to. Nathan picked up his phone one more time and opened his messages. He scrolled to Preston's name and typed, "I need you to look into something. Harper Sullivan server at Rosewood Diner. I want to know everything HR has on file. Employment history, performance reviews, emergency contacts. And I want to know if there are any other single parents on our payroll struggling like she is." Preston's reply came fast. "It's 2 a.m. This can't wait until morning." Nathan hesitated, then typed, "No, it can't." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "You're the boss. I'll have it by 8 a.m. Nathan set the phone down and stood, his decision made. He didn't know what Harper would think when she found out he was more than just a stranger who'd stumbled across her in a park. He didn't know if she'd be angry or grateful or both. But he knew he couldn't walk away, not now, not when he'd finally found someone who made him feel like his life meant more than quarterly earnings and investor reports. He walked to his bedroom, stripped off the suit, and lay down in the darkness. Sleep didn't come easy, but when it did, it was the most restful he'd had in months. And in his dreams he heard a small voice asking if Santa would find them, and a woman's soft humming turning Claire de Lune into a lullaby against the cold. The next morning arrived gray and quiet, the snow still falling in lazy spirals. Harper woke to find Benny already awake, sitting cross-legged on his bed, staring at the window with wide, wondering eyes. "Mommy, it's still snowing. Do you think Santa came?" Harper's heart squeezed. She sat up, smoothing her hair back, and managed a smile. "I think Santa's been very busy, but we're warm and safe, and that's a pretty good present." Benny considered this, then nodded solemnly. "Can we have cookies for breakfast?" Harper laughed a real laugh, surprising herself, and pulled him into a hug. "Yeah, baby, we can have cookies for breakfast." They ate the food Nancy had left Benny chattering about all the things he wanted to do when they had a house again. Get a dog, learn to ride a bike, have a birthday party with a cake shaped like a dinosaur. Harper listened, her chest aching with love and fear and determination. She would give him those things, somehow. She didn't know how, but she would. Her phone buzzed. She'd charged it overnight using the motel's outlet. And she glanced at the screen. A text from an unknown number. "This is Warren Abbott, manager at Rosewood Diner. Nathan Cordell called asking about you. Are you okay? Do you need anything?" Harper stared at the message, her pulse quickening. Nathan had called her manager. Why? What did that mean? She typed back quickly. "I'm fine. Family emergency. I'll be back to work on the 26th. Warren's response was immediate. "Okay. And Harper, whatever you need, just ask. We take care of our people here." She set the phone down, her hands shaking slightly. "We take care of our people." She'd worked at Rosewood Diner for 14 months, and she'd always been just another server, another name on the schedule. But now Warren was texting her personally, offering help because Nathan Cordell, CEO of the entire restaurant group, had asked about her. The weight of that settled over her, uncomfortable and confusing. Benny tugged on her sleeve. "Mommy, can we go outside? I want to build a snowman." Harper looked at her son, at his bright, hopeful face, and made a decision. "Yeah, let's build a snowman." They bundled up in their thin jackets. Harper made a mental note to find a thrift store to get Benny something warmer and headed outside. The motel's small courtyard was covered in fresh snow, untouched and perfect. And Benny immediately began rolling a snowball, his laughter ringing out in the cold air. Harper helped him, her fingers going numb despite her gloves, but she didn't care. This moment, her son playing safe and happy, was worth every frozen finger, every ache, every sleepless night they were finishing the snowman's head. When a black sedan pulled into the parking lot, Harper's stomach dropped. She knew that car, or at least cars like it, expensive, polished, the kind driven by people who didn't worry about gas prices or parking tickets. The driver's door opened and Nathan Cordell stepped out. He wasn't wearing the suit from last night. Instead, he'd dressed down, dark jeans, a wool coat, a scarf wrapped loosely around his neck. He looked younger, somehow less intimidating, but Harper's guard went up anyway. She straightened, brushing snow from her hands, and stepped in front of Benny protectively. Nathan approached slowly, his hands in his pockets, his expression careful. "Morning." Harper nodded, her voice guarded. "Morning." Benny, oblivious to the tension, waved enthusiastically. "Mr. Nathan, look, we made a snowman." Nathan smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes and crouched down to Benny's level. "That's a great snowman, but he needs a face." Benny's eyes widened. "We don't have anything for eyes." Nathan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out 2 quarters. "How about these?" Benny took the coins reverently like they were treasure and carefully pressed them into the snowman's head. Nathan helped him find a stick for a mouth, a small rock for a nose, and when they were done, Benny stepped back and clapped his mittened hands together. "He's perfect." Nathan stood brushing snow from his knees and looked at Harper. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. Then Nathan pulled an envelope from his coat and held it out. "This is for you." Harper took it warily, her fingers brushing his, and opened it. Inside was a check made out to Rosewood Diner's emergency fund, $800, and a note in neat handwriting. "Advance on wages. HR approved. No strings." Harper's hands tightened on the envelope, her jaw clenching. "I didn't ask for this. I know, but it's company policy now. Emergency support for single-parent employees." Harper's eyes snapped up to his. "Company policy since when?" Nathan's expression didn't change. "Since last night." The implication hung in the air between them. Harper's breath came faster, her voice rising. "You created a policy because of me." "I created a policy because it was the right thing to do. You just happened to remind me of that." Harper wanted to argue, to shove the envelope back at him, to tell him she didn't need his pity or his charity or whatever this was. But Benny was there watching them with curious eyes, and she couldn't afford pride, not really, not when $800 meant the difference between surviving and drowning. She folded the envelope carefully and slipped it into her pocket. "I'll pay it back." Nathan nodded, accepting this without argument. "I know you will." They stood there in the snow, the silence stretching until Benny broke it by asking if they could give the snowman a hat. Nathan glanced around, then unwound his own scarf and draped it over the snowman's head. Benny laughed with delight, and Harper felt something shift in her chest, something dangerous and terrifying and wholly unwelcome. She couldn't afford to feel anything for this man. She couldn't afford to trust to hope, to let herself believe that kindness came without cost. But when Nathan looked at her, his eyes steady and open, she felt the first crack in the wall she'd built around herself. And that crack scared her more than anything else. Harper returned to work on December 26th, arriving 30 minutes early as always. The diner smelled of coffee and bacon grease, familiar and grounding, and she tied her apron with practiced efficiency. Her hands moved automatically, filling salt shakers, wiping down tables, checking that the ketchup bottles were full. But her mind kept circling back to the envelope in her pocket. $800. A policy that didn't exist 3 days ago. A CEO who'd shown up at her motel to watch her son build a snowman. Maggie Callahan emerged from the kitchen, her steel gray hair pulled back in its usual bun. Her weathered face breaking into a relieved smile the moment she spotted Harper. She crossed the diner in 4 long strides and pulled Harper into a hug that smelled of coffee and cigarettes and 30 years of hard work. "Where the hell were you?" We were worried sick. Harper returned the embrace briefly before pulling back, her defenses already rising. Family emergency. Maggie's sharp blue eyes studied her face, reading the truth Harper wouldn't speak. You don't have family except Benny. What really happened? Before Harper could deflect, Warren Abbott appeared from his office. His expression tense. He was a practical man, mid-40s, with thinning hair and a clipboard he carried like a shield. He gestured toward the back. Harper, we need to talk. Maggie shot her a look that said, be careful, and Harper followed Warren into the cramped office that smelled of old coffee and printer ink. He closed the door and turned to face her, his arms crossed. Nathan Cordell called me, personally, at 11 o'clock on Christmas Eve, asked if you were okay. Harper's stomach dropped, but she kept her voice steady. He helped me when I needed it, that's all. Warren's eyebrows rose. That's all, Harper. Nathan Cordell doesn't call managers about individual servers, ever. What's going on between you two? Nothing. He found me in a difficult situation and offered assistance. End of story. Warren didn't look convinced, but he let it go. He picked up an envelope from his desk, identical to the one Nathan had given her, and held it out. New company policy. Emergency fund for single parents, $800 approved by HR. It's yours if you need it. Harper stared at the envelope, her chest tightening. Nathan had actually done it. Created a policy, implemented it company-wide, made it official. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was bigger than that, and somehow that made it even harder to accept. When did this policy start? Warren glanced at his computer screen. December 25th, yesterday. Pretty fast turnaround for corporate. Harper took the envelope with shaking hands, her mind reeling. She'd worked in restaurants for 6 years, had seen policies debated and delayed for months over budget concerns. But Nathan had pushed this through in less than 24 hours. Because of her. Because of one night in a park. How many employees does this cover? Warren scrolled through his screen. 47 across all 12 locations. You're one of them. 47. Harper felt something shift in her understanding. This wasn't charity disguised as policy. This was Nathan recognizing a systemic problem and actually fixing it. She didn't know whether to be grateful or angry or both. Thank you for letting me know. Warren studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Harper, whatever happened, whatever's going on, just be careful. People at this level, they don't do things without reasons. Harper left the office with both envelopes burning in her pocket, her mind churning. She made it through the morning shift on autopilot, refilling coffee and taking orders and smiling at customers while her thoughts spun in circles. At 2 o'clock, she clocked out and headed to the community center to pick up Benny. The building was old brick with peeling paint, but the inside was warm and filled with children's laughter. Harper found Benny in the music room, sitting at an upright piano with Lillian Westbrook. The older woman's silver hair was pinned in an elegant twist, her posture perfect despite her 67 years. And she looked up when Harper entered. Ah, Harper, perfect timing. I was just telling Benny about the recital next month. Benny bounced on the piano bench, his gap-toothed grin lighting up his whole face. Mrs. Westbrook says I can perform a real performance with an audience and everything. Harper's heart swelled and ached simultaneously. She crossed to them, running her hand through Benny's hair. That's wonderful, baby. Lillian stood, her movements graceful despite arthritis that Harper knew plagued her hands. She gestured for Harper to follow her to the corner of the room, away from Benny's eager ears. He has perfect pitch, Harper, and an instinct for composition that I haven't seen in 20 years of teaching. He's genuinely gifted. Harper knew this already. She'd known it since Benny was 3 and had picked out Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star on her old piano after hearing it once. She'd known it every time he hummed melodies she'd never taught him, every time his small fingers found the keys like they'd been made for them. but knowing it and facing it were different things. I can't afford lessons beyond what you're already doing. Lillian's expression softened. I'm not asking for money, I'm offering you a job. The center needs a piano teacher for our after-school program, 12 hours a week, $18 an hour. You'd be teaching beginners mostly, but it would give you time with Benny and extra income. Harper did the math automatically. $216 a week, $864 a month. Combined with her diner wages, that would put her over $3,000 a month for the first time in 6 years. Actual breathing room. The possibility of savings. I'm not certified to teach. You went to Berkeley. That's more certification than most piano teachers have. And I've heard you play Harper. You're better than you think you are. Harper's throat tightened. She hadn't touched a piano seriously in 6 years, not since she'd dropped out to have Benny. The muscle memory was still there, her fingers still knew the patterns, the shapes, the way Chopin flowed differently than Debussy. But she'd locked that part of herself away. Music was the dream she'd sacrificed for survival, and reopening that door felt dangerous. Can I think about it? Lillian smiled. Of course. But don't think too long. Classes start in 2 weeks. Harper collected Benny and walked home through streets turned gray with old snow. The apartment Nathan had arranged was only 6 blocks away, and they made it in 15 minutes. Home. The words still felt foreign, temporary, like something that could be snatched away at any moment. But when she unlocked the door and Benny ran inside shouting about his upcoming performance, Harper let herself feel it, just for a second. Home. The piano stood in the corner of the living room, its dark wood gleaming in the afternoon light. Benny went straight to it, climbing onto the bench and picking out the melody he'd been learning. Harper watched him, her chest aching with a complex mixture of love and fear and something else she didn't want to name. She thought about Nathan standing in the snow, helping Benny build a snowman. Nathan creating company policy in the middle of the night. Nathan showing up in her life like a storm she hadn't seen coming. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered warily. Harper Sullivan? Yes. This is Preston Aldridge, CFO of Heartland Restaurant Group. I'm calling because Mr. Cordell asked me to follow up on your housing situation. I understand you recently experienced an eviction. Harper's grip tightened on the phone. That's personal information. Preston's voice remained professional neutral. Mr. Cordell owns several apartment buildings in Chicago. He has a vacant unit in Lakeview that would suit your needs. 2 bedrooms, reasonable rent. If you're interested, I can arrange a viewing. Harper's pulse pounded in her ears. This was happening too fast, pushing too hard against the walls she'd built. What's the rent? $650 a month, utilities included. Harper knew the market. 2-bedroom apartments in Lakeview went for $1,500 minimum. This was charity with a lease agreement, and her pride bristled against it, even as her practical side screamed at her to accept. I need to see it first. Of course. Would tomorrow at 2 work? Harper agreed and ended the call, her hands shaking. She sank onto the couch, staring at the piano, at Benny's small form bent over the keys. Everything was moving so fast. 3 days ago she'd been homeless. Now she had emergency funds, a job offer, and the possibility of an apartment she could actually afford. All because Nathan Cordell had decided to care. The next day, Harper left Benny with Maggie and took the bus to Lakeview. The neighborhood was nicer than anywhere she'd lived in 6 years, tree-lined streets, well-maintained buildings, coffee shops with outdoor seating. The address Preston had given her belonged to a 3-story brick building with clean windows and a functional buzzer system. She pressed the button for the manager's office, and a woman's voice crackled through. Come on up, 3rd floor. The elevator worked. That alone felt like luxury. Harper rode it to the 3rd floor and found apartment 4B at the end of the hall. The door opened before she could knock, and a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a property management polo smiled at her. "Harper Sullivan, I'm Diane Chen, building manager. Come in, come in." Harper stepped inside and felt her breath catch. The apartment was clean bright, with hardwood floors and windows that let in actual sunlight. The living room was a decent size, the kitchen had real counter space, and through an open doorway she could see 2 bedrooms. One large enough for a bed and dresser, one smaller but perfect for a child. And in the center of the living room, positioned to catch the light, stood an upright piano. Harper froze. "What is this?" Diane followed her gaze. "Oh, the piano, previous tenant left it, said it was too expensive to move. Mr. Cordell was going to donate it to a music school, but if you want it, it's yours." Harper crossed to the piano slowly, her heart hammering. She ran her fingers along the keys. Yamaha U1 professional quality, worth at least $8,000. No one just left a piano like this behind. This was Nathan's doing. Another gift disguised as coincidence. Who was the previous tenant? Diane hesitated. "I'm not sure. The unit's been vacant for a few months." Harper's jaw clenched. She turned to face Diane, her voice hard. "There was no previous tenant was there. Mr. Cordell prepared this apartment for me specifically." Diane's expression flickered, caught between professional discretion and honest sympathy. "I really can't discuss Mr. Cordell's business decisions, but the rent is $650, the lease is standard, and you'd be a valued tenant." Harper wanted to walk out, wanted to reject this obvious manipulation, this carefully constructed rescue operation. But she thought about Benny sleeping in motel rooms, about the winter getting colder, about the impossibility of finding anything remotely affordable on her income. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford, and maybe that was the cruelest truth of all. "I'll take it." Diane smiled. "Wonderful. I'll draw up the paperwork. You can move in whenever you're ready." Harper left the building with a signed lease and a key that felt heavier than it should. She sat at the bus stop, staring at nothing, trying to process what was happening. Nathan Cordell was systematically removing every obstacle in her life, piece by piece. Homelessness solved, income increased, housing secured. And she had no idea what he wanted in return, which made it all the more terrifying. Her phone rang. Nathan's number. She'd saved it after he'd texted her the motel address. She answered. "You bought me a piano." Nathan's voice was calm, unsurprised. "I bought the building a piano. You just happen to live there. Don't lie to me. If we're doing this, whatever this is, I need honesty." There was a pause. Then Nathan spoke, his voice quieter. "You're right. I'm sorry. Yes, I bought it for you. Because Benny deserves a chance to learn, and you deserve to play again." "Is that such a terrible thing?" Harper's throat tightened. "It's too much. All of it. The apartment, the policy, the piano. Why are you doing this?" "Because I can. Because you need it. Because when I saw you in that park, I saw someone who'd been fighting alone for too long, and I thought maybe I could help." "But why? What do you want from me?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw in a way she hadn't heard before. "I don't want anything. I just want to stop feeling like my life is a balance sheet with no meaning. You reminded me that success is worthless if you're not using it to make things better. That's all." Harper closed her eyes, tears threatening. She didn't know how to respond to that, didn't know how to reconcile her need for independence with the undeniable fact that Nathan's help was changing her life. "I'm moving in next week, and I'm paying $700 a month, not $650. That's my condition." "Harper, $700, and I maintain the common areas of the building. That's the deal. Take it or I walk." She heard Nathan exhale, something between frustration and amusement. "You're impossible. I'm practical. Do we have a deal?" "Yeah, we have a deal." Harper ended the call and sat at the bus stop until her breathing steadied. Then she called Lillian Westbrook and accepted the teaching position. If she was going to survive this, if she was going to keep her dignity intact, she needed to earn her way. Every dollar, every opportunity, every step forward had to be something she could claim as her own effort. Because the alternative, accepting that she needed someone, that she couldn't do this alone, was a truth she wasn't ready to face. Over the next 2 weeks, Harper moved her meager possessions into apartment 4B. Everything she owned fit into 4 cardboard boxes and 2 garbage bags. Benny's excitement filled the empty rooms, his laughter echoing off bare walls as he ran from the living room to his new bedroom and back again. Nathan offered to help move furniture, but Harper declined. She bought a used bed frame from Craigslist, borrowed sheets from Maggie, found a kitchen table at a thrift store. The apartment remained sparse, but it was theirs. Earned. Clean. January arrived with bitter cold and news that shook Harper's fragile equilibrium. Warren called her into his office on the 3rd, his expression grave. "I need to tell you something and you're not going to like it." Harper's stomach dropped. "What?" "Tiffany Morrison has been spreading rumors about you and Nathan Cordell. She's saying you're getting special treatment because you're involved with him." Harper felt the blood drain from her face. "That's not true. I know that. Maggie knows that. But Tiffany's convincing people otherwise, and it's creating problems." Harper's hands clenched into fists. Tiffany Morrison was 24, blonde, ambitious, and had made it clear from day one that she resented Harper's high customer ratings. But this was beyond petty jealousy. This was sabotage. "What kind of problems?" Warren shifted uncomfortably. "2 servers have complained to HR. They're saying it's unfair that you got promoted to shift supervisor when you've only been here 14 months. They're saying the emergency fund policy is just Nathan covering for his relationship with you." Harper wanted to scream. She wanted to throw something to find Tiffany and explain in excruciating detail exactly how hard she'd worked for every single thing she had. But she forced herself to stay calm, to breathe through the rage. "I earned that promotion. Check my performance reviews. Check my customer satisfaction scores. I have the highest numbers in this location. I know, and I've documented everything, but Harper, you need to understand this looks bad." CEO helps an employee, gives her an apartment, creates a policy that benefits her. Even if it's all legitimate, the optics are terrible. Harper stood her jaw tight. "So what do you want me to do? Quit, move out, pretend Nathan? Cordell didn't help me when I was about to freeze on the street with my son." Warren held up his hands. "No, I'm just warning you. This is going to get worse before it gets better, and you need to be prepared." Harper left the office and found Maggie waiting by the coffee station. The older woman took one look at her face and pulled her aside. "I heard. Tiffany's been running her mouth for days now. Ignore her." Harper's voice came out sharper than intended. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one being accused of sleeping your way into a promotion." Maggie's expression hardened. "Listen to me. I've worked in restaurants for 30 years. I've seen every kind of rumor, every kind of backstabbing. You know what shuts people up? Results. You do your job better than anyone else, and eventually the truth becomes obvious." Harper wanted to believe that, but she'd learned that truth and justice were luxuries and gossip was cheap. She finished her shift in a haze of anger and humiliation, avoiding eye contact with Tiffany, who watched her from across the diner with a smug smile. That evening, Harper stood in her apartment staring at the piano she still hadn't played. Benny was at his first piano lesson with Lillian, and the silence pressed against her like a physical weight. She thought about Nathan's words. "You deserve to play again." But did she? Did she deserve any of this? Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "This is Tiffany. We both know what's really going on. Enjoy it while it lasts." Harper stared at the message, fury and helplessness warring inside her. She typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally throwing the phone onto the couch. She crossed to the piano, sat down, and placed her hands on the keys. 6 years since she'd played anything serious. 6 years since she'd let herself feel this part of her identity. She started with scales, mechanical and safe. Then simple pieces, Mozart, Bach, the exercises that had been drilled into her at Berkeley. Her fingers remembered even when her mind resisted, and slowly the music took over. She played Moonlight Sonata, 3rd movement, fast and angry and grieving. The notes poured out of her all the frustration and fear and exhaustion she couldn't voice. And when she finally stopped, her hands were shaking and her face was wet with tears. The apartment door opened. Benny burst in, Lillian following more slowly. "Mom, I learned 3 new songs today. Mrs. Westbrook says I'm a natural." Harper wiped her eyes quickly and smiled. "That's wonderful, baby." Lillian caught her eye over Benny's head, understanding flickering in her expression. She stepped forward, her voice gentle. "Harper, would you play something for us? I'd love to hear what Benny's mother can do." Harper hesitated, but Benny was already tugging her hand. His eyes bright with excitement. She sat back down at the piano, and this time she played something softer. Clair de Lune. The piece she'd hummed in the park that night, trying to create warmth where there was none. The music filled the apartment, transformed it from empty rooms into something that felt almost like belonging. And when she finished, Benny climbed onto her lap and whispered that it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever heard. Lillian stayed for tea, and they talked about Benny's progress, about the recital in February, about Harper's new teaching schedule. It was the first normal conversation Harper had had in months, the first time she'd felt like a person instead of a problem to be solved. When Lillian left, Harper felt something shift inside her. Maybe she could do this. Maybe she could build a life here, piece by careful piece, until it felt real. But the next morning, everything fell apart. Harper arrived at the diner to find Warren waiting with a grim expression and 2 women from corporate HR. They escorted her to the back office, and her stomach twisted with dread. The taller HR rep, a woman named Susan with severe glasses and a tablet, spoke first. "Ms. Sullivan, we've received multiple complaints regarding your relationship with CEO Nathan Cordell. We need to conduct a formal investigation." Harper's world tilted. "Investigation? There's nothing to investigate. Mr. Cordell helped me during a difficult time, that's all." Susan tapped her tablet. "You're renting an apartment owned by Mr. Cordell at below market rates. You received an emergency fund payment approved by him personally. You were promoted to shift supervisor 2 weeks after this relationship began. These facts raise questions about favoritism and potential policy violations." Harper wanted to argue that she'd earned the promotion, that the emergency fund was company-wide, that the rent was actually above what she'd insisted on paying. But the words stuck in her throat, because even if it was all legitimate, even if every single thing could be documented and justified, it looked exactly like what Tiffany was saying. It looked like she was using Nathan. "What happens now?" Susan's expression remained neutral. "You'll be placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. Full pay, but you cannot work until this is resolved." Harper felt the ground drop out from under her. Administrative leave meant guilt in everyone's eyes, meant weeks of whispers and assumptions, meant losing the one thing she'd built herself. "How long will this take?" 2 to 4 weeks. We'll be in touch." Harper left the diner in a daze, Maggie's sympathetic gaze following her out. She made it 3 blocks before she had to stop, leaning against a building, trying to breathe through the panic. Administrative leave, investigation, 2 to 4 weeks without work, without the routine that kept her grounded. And all because Nathan Cordell had decided to help her. She called him. He answered on the first ring. "Harper, what's wrong?" She couldn't keep the tremor out of her voice. "I've been placed on administrative leave. HR is investigating our relationship. They think I'm using you for favors." Nathan's response was immediate. "That's insane. I'll call them right now. I'll explain." "No, don't. That'll only make it worse." "Harper, I'm not going to let you take the fall for my decisions." Harper closed her eyes, fighting tears. "This isn't working. The apartment, the job, all of it. People see what they want to see, and what they see is a poor single mother sleeping with her rich boss for benefits. I can't fight that. I can't." "Then don't fight it alone. Let me help." Harper laughed bitterly. "Your help is what got me into this mess." The words hung between them, cruel and true. Nathan was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was tight. "Do you regret it, meeting me, accepting help?" Harper thought about Benny's warm bed, about the piano in her living room, about the first time in 6 years she hadn't gone to sleep terrified of tomorrow. "No, but I don't know if I can handle the cost. What if we made this real public? No more hiding, no more questions about motivations. We date openly, document everything with HR, remove any possibility of conflict of interest." Harper's heart stuttered. "We barely know each other." "Then let's fix that. Have dinner with me. No work, no pressure, just two people trying to figure out if this is something worth fighting for." Harper wanted to say no, wanted to retreat to protect herself and Benny from the inevitable collapse she was certain was coming. But Nathan's voice held something she hadn't heard before: vulnerability. He was offering not rescue but partnership, and that was harder to refuse. "One dinner, but I pay for my half." Nathan's soft laugh carried through the phone. "You drive a hard bargain. I learned from watching you negotiate." They set a date for the following evening, and Harper ended the call feeling unsteady and reckless and terrified. She walked home slowly, trying to piece together how her life had become this complicated in less than a month. At the apartment, she found a note slipped under her door, Nathan's handwriting. "Harper, I know you think I'm trying to rescue you, but the truth is you rescued me first, from a life that looked successful but felt empty, from forgetting that people matter more than profit margins, from becoming the kind of man who attends galas but has no one to come home to. I don't need you to be grateful. I just need you to give us a chance." And Harper read the note 3 times, her chest aching. She thought about the man who'd crouched in the snow to talk to her son, who'd created company policy in the middle of the night, who'd looked at her with something that might have been hope. And she thought about herself, the woman who'd fought so hard to need nothing from anyone that she'd forgotten how to accept kindness without suspicion. The next evening, Harper stood in front of her meager closet trying to find something appropriate for dinner with a CEO. She settled on the only dress she owned that wasn't stained or stretched, a simple black sheath she'd bought for her Berkeley audition 7 years ago. It still fit barely, and with her hair down and minimal makeup, she looked almost like the person she'd been before life had beaten the sickness out of her. Nathan picked her up at 7, and Harper left Benny with Maggie, who'd insisted with the kind of knowing smile that made Harper's cheeks burn. Nathan had dressed down, dark jeans, a button-up shirt, no tie, and he looked younger, less intimidating. He opened the car door for her, and they drove through the city in awkward syncs until Harper broke it. "Where are we going?" "Italian place in Lincoln Park. It's quiet, good food, and I promise no one from work will be there." The restaurant was small, tucked into a side street with warm lighting and red checked tablecloths. Nathan had reserved a corner booth, private but not conspicuous, and the server brought water and bread without hovering. Harper ordered the cheapest pasta on the menu, and Nathan noticed but didn't comment. They sat across from each other, the space between them charged with everything unsaid. Nathan spoke first. "Tell me about Berkeley. Why music?" Harper traced the rim of her water glass, debating how much to reveal. My grandmother taught me piano. She said music was the language you used when words weren't enough. I believed her. What made you leave? Harper met his eyes, weighing whether he could handle the truth. Benny's father. We were together for 6 months. I thought it was serious. When I told him I was pregnant, he panicked. His family offered me $10,000 to terminate the pregnancy and sign an NDA. I refused. He disappeared. I had to choose between finishing my degree or keeping my son. Nathan's jaw tightened, anger flickering in his expression. You chose Benny. Every time. No regrets. Nathan reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers but not touching. That takes incredible strength. Harper pulled her hand back, uncomfortable with the praise. It was survival. There's a difference. No, there isn't. Survival is strength. You just don't see it that way. The food arrived, giving Harper an excuse to look away from the intensity in his gaze. They ate in silence for a while, the pasta warm and comforting, and slowly the tension eased. Nathan told her about building Heartland from a single struggling diner to 12 locations, about the 90-hour weeks and the investors who doubted him, and the moment he'd realized he'd won but felt hollow. Harper found herself listening, really listening, and recognizing pieces of herself in his story. What happened with your wife? Nathan set down his fork, his expression distant. Victoria. We married too young for the wrong reasons. She wanted the idea of me, successful entrepreneur, good provider. I wanted someone to validate that my success mattered. We made it 3 years before she realized I'd never actually learned how to be present. I was always working, always planning the next expansion. She left on Christmas Eve 2 years ago. Said I'd married my work, not her. She was right. Harper absorbed this understanding, clicking into place. That's why you were walking through the park that night. Yeah. I'd left a gala early, couldn't stand another conversation about quarterly earnings. And then I saw you and Benny asked me to tell Santa you'd moved, and something just shifted. Like I'd been living in grayscale and suddenly remembered what color looked like. Harper's throat tightened. She didn't know how to respond to that kind of honesty, that kind of raw vulnerability. She'd spent 6 years building walls, and Nathan was dismantling them brick by brick without even trying. I'm scared, she heard herself say. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Of what? Of this, of you, of losing everything if it doesn't work. I've lost so much already, my degree, my dreams, my independence. I can't lose what I'm building now. Nathan leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. Then we build it together. Not me saving you, not you owing me. Just two people who are tired of being alone, trying to see if they fit. Harper wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be something real. But hope was dangerous, and she'd learned to live without it. What if people keep saying I'm using you? Then we prove them wrong. I'll transfer your employment to a different location, remove any reporting relationship. We'll date openly, document everything. Make it impossible for anyone to claim impropriety. Harper considered this. It was logical, practical, the kind of solution that addressed the problem without denying its existence. But it also meant going public, making this real in a way that couldn't be undone. One condition. If this goes wrong, if we don't work out, I keep my job and my apartment. I need to know I'm not risking everything on a maybe. Nathan nodded without hesitation. Done. I'll have it written into your lease, and Harper, I don't do maybes. When I commit to something, I see it through. They finished dinner, and Nathan drove her home through streets glittering with ice. When they reached her building, he walked her to the door but didn't try to come up. Instead, he pulled an envelope from his coat. For the investigation. Documentation of every decision I made regarding your employment. Performance reviews, customer satisfaction metrics, the timeline of the emergency fund policy. Everything they need to see this was legitimate. Harper took the envelope, her fingers brushing his. Thank you. Nathan smiled and it reached his eyes. Same time next week. Harper surprised herself by answering yes. Over the next 3 weeks, Harper and Nathan fell into a rhythm. Dinners twice a week, always public, always documented. Phone calls in the evenings after Benny went to bed. Nathan attended Benny's piano practice, sitting in the back of the community center and watching with quiet intensity. Harper started teaching her first class 12 students aged 6 to 10, and discovered she loved it more than she'd expected. The HR investigation concluded in late January. Susan called Harper personally. Ms. Sullivan, we've completed our review. All allegations of impropriety have been found baseless. Your promotion was merit-based, supported by documented performance metrics. The emergency fund policy applies to 47 employees and was approved through proper channels. You're cleared to return to work. Harper felt the weight lift from her shoulders, but Susan wasn't finished. However, given the relationship between you and Mr. Cordell, we're transferring you to our Lakeview location effective immediately. You'll report to a different manager, maintain your shift supervisor role, and your salary will increase to reflect the position's responsibilities at that location. This removes any potential conflict of interest. Harper agreed, relief washing through her. When she told Nathan that evening, his response was quiet satisfaction. Good. Now we can do this right. Do what right? Nathan's voice softened. This, us, whatever we're becoming. Harper's heart stumbled. She wasn't ready to name what was growing between them, but she couldn't deny it existed. And for the first time in 6 years, she let herself consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to do everything alone. February brought a cold snap that turned Chicago into a maze of ice and frozen exhaust. Harper settled into her new position at the Lakeview location, where the staff knew her only as the competent shift supervisor who'd transferred in from Rosewood. No whispers followed her here, no suspicious glances. She worked her shifts, taught piano 4 afternoons a week, and slowly built something that felt almost like stability. Nathan called every evening at 8:30 after Benny's bedtime. They talked about everything and nothing, his frustration with a difficult board member, her pride when one of her students finally mastered a tricky passage, the way the city looked at night from his penthouse windows. The conversation stretched longer each time, neither of them willing to hang up first, and Harper found herself looking forward to that half hour of connection more than she wanted to admit. On Valentine's Day, Nathan showed up at her apartment with takeout from an upscale Thai restaurant and a stuffed dinosaur for Benny. Harper let him in, acutely aware that this was the first time he'd been inside since she'd moved in. The space was still sparse, second-hand furniture, bare walls, everything functional but impermanent, and she saw him take it in with careful neutrality. Benny launched himself at Nathan the moment he spotted the dinosaur, chattering about his upcoming recital and the new song Mrs. Westbrook was teaching him. Nathan listened with genuine attention, asking questions that showed he actually remembered previous conversations. And Harper felt something warm and dangerous unfold in her chest. They ate dinner cross-legged on the living room floor because Harper only had 2 chairs, and Benny insisted Nathan sit next to him. The Thai food was excellent, probably cost more than Harper spent on groceries in a week, and Nathan had remembered that she hated spicy food. That small detail, that he'd paid attention, that he'd cared enough to remember, made Harper's throat tight. After dinner, Benny begged Nathan to hear him play the piece he'd been practicing. Nathan settled on the couch while Harper helped Benny onto the piano bench, and then her son played Für Elise with a concentration that made him stick his tongue out slightly. He made it through the entire piece with only 2 mistakes, and when he finished, Nathan applauded like he'd just witnessed a Carnegie Hall performance. Benny beamed. Did you like it? Nathan's smile was unguarded, genuinely delighted. You're going to be famous one day. Benny considered this seriously. Only if Mom comes with me. She's the best piano player in the whole world. Nathan glanced at Harper, something shifting in his expression. I'd love to hear her play. Harper tensed. She'd been playing more lately, teaching required it, but always alone or with students. Playing for Nathan felt exposing in a way she wasn't ready for. But Benny was already tugging her hand. His eyes bright with excitement, and she couldn't refuse without explanation. She sat at the piano, her hands hovering over the keys, and chose something safe. A Mozart sonata, technically demanding but emotionally neutral. Her fingers found the patterns automatically, muscle memory, guiding her through passages she'd learned a decade ago. But halfway through the second movement, something shifted. The notes stopped being just sound and became feeling, and before she could stop herself, she transitioned into Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Slow, melancholic, achingly beautiful. The music she'd played the night before she'd dropped out of Berkeley, when she'd known her life was about to change irrevocably. When she finished, the apartment was silent except for Benny's soft breathing. He'd fallen asleep on the couch, worn out from excitement. Harper turned to find Nathan watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. You're not just good, you're extraordinary. Harper stood uncomfortable with the praise. I'm out of practice. That was out of practice, Harper. You could be performing professionally. She crossed to the couch and gently lifted Benny, carrying him to his bedroom. Could have. Past tense. That life ended 6 years ago. Nathan followed her to Benny's doorway, watching as she tucked her son in and kissed his forehead. When she turned, Nathan was leaning against the frame, his expression thoughtful. What if it didn't have to be past tense? Harper brushed past him back to the living room. I have responsibilities. Dreams are for people with safety nets. Nathan caught her hand, stopping her. His touch was warm, grounding. What if you had a safety net? Harper pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. I can't think like that. The moment I start depending on someone, the moment I let myself believe in maybe, that's when it all falls apart. I've learned that lesson too many times. Nathan moved closer but didn't touch her again. Harper, I'm not going anywhere, but I need you to believe that, because I can't keep trying to prove something you've already decided is impossible. Harper met his eyes, seeing the frustration and hurt there, and felt her defenses crack. I'm trying, but trust doesn't come easy when every person who was supposed to stay has left. Nathan exhaled slowly. I know, and I'm not asking you to trust blindly. I'm just asking you to give us a real chance. Not waiting for it to fail, but actually trying to make it work. Harper wanted to argue, to list all the reasons this was dangerous and reckless, but standing in her small apartment with her son sleeping peacefully in the next room, and Nathan looking at her like she was worth fighting for, she found herself nodding instead. Okay, a real chance. Nathan's smile was slow and relieved. Yeah, but Nathan, if this goes wrong, if you change your mind, I need you to be honest. Don't just disappear. I can handle rejection. I can't handle wondering what I did wrong. Nathan stepped closer, his hand cupping her face with a gentleness that made her breath catch. I'm not going to disappear. I don't do anything halfway, Harper. When I commit, I'm all in. He kissed her then, soft and certain, and Harper felt the last of her resistance crumble. She kissed him back, letting herself feel the want and the fear and the fragile hope she'd been suppressing. When they pulled apart, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. Stay for a while, Harper heard herself ask. They sat on the couch, Nathan's arm around her shoulders, and watched a movie neither of them paid attention to. Harper fell asleep against his chest, and when she woke at midnight, he was still there, his breathing steady and peaceful. She extracted herself carefully and covered him with the blanket from her bed, then stood watching him sleep, this man who'd crashed into her life and refused to leave. The next morning, Nathan left early to avoid Benny waking up and asking questions Harper wasn't ready to answer. But he texted an hour later last night meant everything. "Can I take you both to breakfast?" Harper agreed, and they met at a diner in Wicker Park, deliberately choosing somewhere Benny would love. Her son was thrilled to see Nathan again, and they spent 2 hours over pancakes and bacon. Benny chattering about school and dinosaurs while Nathan listened with patient amusement. Harper watched them interact and felt her heart constrict with equal parts joy and terror. Benny was getting attached, and if this fell apart, it wouldn't just be her heart that broke. March arrived with the first hints of thaw, the snow turning to gray slush and the days stretching longer. Harper's teaching schedule expanded. She was now working with 20 students, and Lillian had hinted that the community center wanted to offer her a full-time position. The money would be better than the diner, the hours more family-friendly, but Harper hesitated. Teaching felt like admitting she'd never go back to performing, never finish what she'd started at Berkeley. It felt like giving up. She mentioned this to Nathan during one of their evening calls, her voice tight with frustration. Nathan was quiet for a moment before responding. "What if you didn't have to choose? What if you could teach and finish your degree?" Harper laughed bitterly. "Berkeley costs $40,000 a year. I can barely afford rent." "What if there was a scholarship? Heartland has an education fund for employees who had to leave school due to hardship. You'd qualify." Harper's stomach dropped. "Nathan, no. Absolutely not." "Why not?" "It's a legitimate program available to all employees. 12 people have applied. You'd just be one of them." "Except I'd be dating the CEO who created the program. It looks exactly like what everyone already thinks, that I'm using you." Nathan's frustration bled through the phone. "Or it looks like a company supporting its employees' education." "Harper, you can't keep punishing yourself for my decisions. I created these programs because they're the right thing to do. That doesn't make you wrong for benefiting from them." Harper wanted to believe that, but the memory of the HR investigation, of Tiffany's smug smile and the whispers that had followed her, made acceptance feel impossible. "I need to think about it." "Fair enough. But Harper, think about what you actually want, not just what you think you're allowed to want." The words stayed with Harper for days, circling through her mind during shifts and lessons and the quiet moments before sleep. What did she want? The question felt dangerous, indulgent. She'd spent so long focused on survival that wanting felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Benny's recital arrived on a Sunday afternoon in mid-March, the community center's small auditorium packed with parents and grandparents and siblings. Harper sat in the front row, her palms sweating, while Nathan slipped into the seat beside her. He'd driven straight from a business meeting, still wearing his suit, and his presence both steadied and unnerved her. Benny was the youngest performer, scheduled to go third. When his name was called, he walked to the piano with careful steps, climbed onto the bench, and looked out at the audience with wide eyes. For a terrifying moment, Harper thought he might freeze. But then his gaze found hers, and she nodded encouragement. He played Für Elise exactly as he'd practiced, his small fingers navigating the keys with a confidence that made Harper's chest ache with pride. But when he reached the end, instead of stopping, he transitioned smoothly into his own composition, the piece he'd been working on for weeks, the one he called Mommy's Song. It was simple, just a repeating melody with variations, but it was his. Original and pure and heartbreakingly sincere, the audience erupted in applause when he finished, and Benny beamed, bowing like Lillian had taught him. He ran off the stage and straight to Harper, throwing his arms around her neck. "Did you like it?" Harper hugged him tight, tears streaming down her face. It was perfect, baby. You were perfect. Nathan rested his hand on Benny's shoulder, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Your mom's right. That was incredible. After the recital, they went for ice cream, and Benny talked non-stop about performing and how many people clapped and whether he could do another recital soon. Nathan listened to every word, asking questions and offering genuine enthusiasm, and Harper watched them together and felt something fundamental shift inside her. This wasn't just about her anymore. Benny loved Nathan, and if she kept pushing Nathan away out of fear, she'd be hurting her son as much as herself. That night, after Benny was asleep, Harper called Nathan. I want to apply for the scholarship. Nathan's relief was palpable even through the phone. Yeah, and Nathan, thank you. For the program, for tonight, for everything. I know I don't say it enough, but I'm grateful. You don't have to thank me. Just keep showing up. That's all I need. Harper filled out the application the next day, hands shaking as she submitted it. 2 weeks later, she received an email from Heartland's education coordinator. Congratulations. You've been awarded the Second Chances Scholarship, full tuition for online degree completion at Berklee College of Music, $15,000 per year for 2 years. Harper read the email 3 times before the reality sank in. She was going back to school. After 6 years, after giving up, after accepting that some dreams died, she was getting a second chance. She called Nathan immediately, her voice breaking. I got it. Nathan's joy was unrestrained. I knew you would. When do you start? Fall semester, September. We should celebrate. Dinner anywhere you want. Harper thought about it, then surprised herself with her answer. Your place. I want to see where you live. There was a pause, and Harper wondered if she'd overstepped, but then Nathan spoke, his voice warm. I'd like that. Friday night I'll cook. Friday arrived with unseasonable warmth, the snow finally melting in earnest. Harper left Benny with Maggie, who'd practically pushed her out the door with a knowing smile, and took the train to Trump Tower. The doorman directed her to the 64th floor, and when the elevator doors opened, Nathan was waiting in the hallway. His penthouse was everything Harper had expected and nothing she'd prepared for. Massive windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than she'd earn in a year. Art on the walls that looked museum-worthy, but it was also strangely empty. No photographs, no personal touches, no evidence that anyone actually lived here. It felt like a hotel suite, expensive and impersonal. Nathan watched her take it in, and she saw self-consciousness flicker across his face. It's a lot. Harper walked to the windows, pressing her palm against the cool glass. It's lonely. Nathan came to stand beside her. Yeah, it is. Why do you stay here? Because I thought success was supposed to look like this. Big apartment, prestigious address, proof that I'd made it. But I've lived here for 5 years and it's never felt like home. Harper turned to face him. Where does feel like home? Nathan's eyes found hers, and the vulnerability in them made her breath catch. Lately, wherever you and Benny are. Harper's chest tightened. She'd spent months keeping Nathan at arm's length, protecting herself from the inevitable hurt. But standing in his empty penthouse, seeing how isolated he'd been, she realized they'd been drowning in different ways. She'd been poor and struggling. He'd been wealthy and alone. And somehow they'd found each other in a park on Christmas Eve, 2 people who'd forgotten what hope felt like. Show me what you were going to cook. Nathan led her to the kitchen, all stainless steel and granite, clearly underused, and pulled out ingredients for pasta carbonara. He wasn't a natural cook, Harper could tell, but he'd clearly practiced this meal. They worked side by side, Harper chopping vegetables while Nathan handled the pasta. And the companionable silence felt more intimate than any conversation. Over dinner, Nathan told her about the upcoming board meeting where Richard Thornton was planning to challenge one of his initiatives. Harper shared her anxiety about starting school again after so long, about whether she could balance work and teaching and parenting and studying. They talked until the city lights blurred below them and the bottle of wine Nathan had opened sat empty between them. Harper stood to leave around 11 and Nathan walked her to the elevator. But instead of saying goodbye, Harper found herself asking the question that had been building all evening. Do you regret it? That night in the park. Everything that came after. Nathan's answer was immediate and certain. Not for a second. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years. Harper stepped closer, her heart hammering. Then stop treating this like it might break. I'm scared too, but I'm tired of being scared alone. Nathan's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle but sure. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you, terrified and uncertain and completely in love with you. And I need to know if you... Nathan kissed her deep and claiming, and when they broke apart, his voice was rough. I've loved you since you played piano that first night, crying over Chopin like it was pulling your heart out through your fingers. I love how you fight for everything, how you never take the easy path, how you raised a kid who still believes in goodness despite everything. I love you, Harper. All and no reservations. Harper felt tears spill over, but for once they weren't from fear or exhaustion. They were relief and joy and the terrifying freedom of letting someone in completely. She kissed Nathan again, pouring 6 years of loneliness and hope into it. And when they finally pulled apart, both of them were shaking. Nathan rested his forehead against hers. Stay tonight. Harper wanted to, desperately. But Benny was with Maggie and she wasn't ready to explain to her son why she'd spent the night at Nathan's. Not yet. Not tonight. But soon. Nathan nodded understanding and rode the elevator down with her. He walked her to the street, hailed a cab, and kissed her one more time before she climbed in. As the cab pulled away, Harper looked back to see Nathan standing on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching her leave. And for the first time since she'd met him, she didn't feel like she was running away. She was just going home, knowing he'd be there tomorrow. April brought rain that washed away the last of winter and turned the city green. Harper and Nathan settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable, dinner twice a week. Phone calls every evening, Nathan attending Benny's piano lessons whenever his schedule allowed. They hadn't told Benny they were officially together, but her son had started calling Nathan by his first name and asking when he was coming over next. The transition from helpful stranger to trusted presence had been so gradual that even Harper couldn't pinpoint when it had happened. Preston Aldridge called Nathan on a Tuesday morning with news that made his stomach drop. The board had scheduled an emergency meeting for Thursday. Richard Thornton was calling for a review of Nathan's CEO position, citing concerns about emotional decision-making and conflicts of interest. Nathan drove to Harper's apartment that night, his mind churning. She opened the door in yoga pants and an old Berkeley sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, and took one look at his face before pulling him inside. What happened? Nathan explained while Harper made tea, her movements efficient and calming. When he finished, she set a mug in front of him and sat down, her expression serious. This is because of me. The policies, the scholarship program, all of it. Richard sees it as proof you're making decisions based on emotion instead of business. Nathan's hands tightened around the mug. The policies are good business. Employee retention is up. Productivity is higher. Customer satisfaction scores have improved across all locations. The numbers prove it. Numbers won't matter if the board decides you're compromised. Nathan met her eyes, seeing the fear there, knowing his next words would either strengthen what they'd built or destroy it. If I have to choose between the company and you, I choose you. Harper's breath caught. Nathan, no. You've worked for 15 years to build Heartland. I can't be the reason you lose it. You're not the reason. Richard's ego is the reason. And if the board is willing to sacrifice good leadership because I fell in love with an employee, a former employee who I have zero professional oversight over, then maybe I don't want to lead that company. Harper stood pacing, her arms wrapped around herself. That's insane. Your whole life is in that company. Nathan stood too, catching her hands. My whole life used to be that company. Now it's you and Benny and something that actually matters. I'm not giving that up. Harper's eyes filled with tears. What if you lose the board vote? What then? Then I start something new, or I don't. But I'll still have you, and that's enough. Harper pulled away, her voice rising. It's not enough, Nathan. I need you to fight for the company. Because if you lose it because of me, you'll resent me. Maybe not now, maybe not for years, but eventually you'll look at what you gave up and hate me for it. Nathan felt the truth of her fear, understood where it came from, a lifetime of people leaving when things got hard. He crossed to her, taking her face in his hands, making her look at him. I will never resent you, and I'm going to fight for the company, but not by sacrificing what we have. I'm going to fight by showing the board that compassion and profit aren't mutually exclusive, that the policies I implemented are making Heartland stronger, not weaker. Harper searched his face, and Nathan could see her trying to believe, trying to let go of the certainty that abandonment was inevitable. Finally, she nodded. Okay, then let's build the strongest case possible. Data, testimonials, financial projections. We have 2 days. They worked through the night, Harper helping him compile employee retention statistics, customer feedback surveys, and financial analyses showing the return on investment for his initiatives. Benny woke up around midnight and found them surrounded by spreadsheets, and Nathan took a break to make the kid hot chocolate while Harper kept working. Thursday arrived with leaden skies and the threat of storms. Nathan, dressed in his sharpest suit, reviewed his presentation one final time and headed to Heartland's headquarters. The boardroom was on the 18th floor, all glass and steel, and the 7 members sat around a massive table. Richard Thornton at the head, Preston Aldridge to Nathan's right, 5 others whose loyalty was uncertain. Richard opened the meeting with a grim expression. We're here to discuss concerns about Nathan Cordell's recent leadership decisions, specifically policies implemented without full board approval and potential conflicts of interest. Nathan stood, connecting his laptop to the presentation screen. I understand the concerns. Let me address them with data. He walked them through everything. The single-parent support initiative had cost $37,000 annually, but had reduced employee turnover by 23%, saving the company over $200,000 in recruitment and training costs. Customer satisfaction scores had increased by 12% across locations where the policy was implemented. The Second Chances Scholarship Program had garnered positive media coverage worth an estimated $500,000 in free publicity. As for conflicts of interest, Harper Sullivan and I are in a relationship. This is documented with HR. She works at a different location under different management. I have no oversight of her employment, and her scholarship was awarded through the same blind review process as 11 other applicants. Richard leaned back, his expression skeptical. The policies are expensive, and your relationship, documented or not, creates perception problems. Preston spoke up, his voice firm. The policies have a positive ROI, and perception problems matter less than actual performance. Revenue is up 40% year over year. We're outperforming competitors in every metric that matters. One of the board members, a woman named Helen Sutherland, raised her hand. I've reviewed the numbers. Preston's right, but Richard has a point about optics. Nathan, why should we trust that your personal life won't continue to affect business decisions? Nathan thought about Harper, about the woman who'd fought for everything she had and taught him that success meant nothing without purpose. He thought about Benny, about the joy of watching a kid discover his talent. And he thought about the man he'd been 2 years ago, wealthy, respected, and completely hollow. Because my personal life has made me a better CEO. I was running this company like a machine, maximizing profit without considering the human cost. Harper didn't make me soft. She reminded me that our employees are people, and when we treat them like assets worth investing in, everyone wins. The numbers prove it. And if the board disagrees, then maybe I'm not the right leader for where you want to take this company. The room fell silent. Richard's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Preston caught Nathan's eye and nodded almost imperceptibly. Helen spoke again. I move that we affirm Nathan's position as CEO and approve all policies pending review for effectiveness in 6 months. I second, Preston added immediately. The vote was taken, 4 in favor, 3 opposed. Nathan kept his CEO position by a single vote. After the meeting, Preston pulled Nathan aside. That was close. Richard's not done. He'll keep looking for ways to undermine you. Nathan nodded, the weight of near loss settling over him. I know, but I'm not backing down. Not from the policies, not from Harper, not from any of it. Preston smiled slightly. Good, because that's the first time in 5 years I've seen you care about something more than quarterly earnings. Don't lose that. Nathan left the office and drove straight to Harper's apartment. It was mid-afternoon and she answered the door in her teaching clothes, eyes wee with anxiety. How did it go? Nathan pulled her into his arms, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and feeling his pulse finally steady. I won, barely, 4-3. Harper sagged against him in relief. Thank God. They stood in the doorway for a long moment, holding each other, until Benny's voice called from inside. Mom, is that Nathan? Tell him to come help me with my new song. Nathan laughed, the tension finally breaking. Harper pulled back her hands, framing his face. You really would have walked away, wouldn't you? If they'd voted you out. Nathan kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. In a heartbeat. You and Benny, it's worth more than any boardroom. Harper's eyes filled, but she was smiling. Come on, Benny's been working on this piece all week. He wants to impress you. Nathan followed her inside, and Benny immediately dragged him to the piano bench. As he listened to the boy play, Harper's hands on his shoulders, Nathan felt something settle in his chest. This was home, not the penthouse, not the corner office. This cramped apartment with second-hand furniture, and a kid who played piano with his tongue sticking out. This was what mattered. Summer arrived early, bringing heat that turned Chicago's streets into shimmering mirages. Harper started her online courses at Berkeley, working late into the night after Benny was asleep. Nathan would come over with coffee and sit beside her while she studied, not talking, just being present. Sometimes Benny would wake up and find them there, Nathan's hand resting on Harper's back while she worked through music theory assignments, and he'd climb between them and fall back asleep. In June, Nathan surprised Harper by renting a cabin in Wisconsin for a long weekend. He'd cleared it with Maggie to watch Benny, but Harper hesitated. I've never left him overnight before. Nathan took her hand. He'll be fine. Maggie loves him. And Harper, when's the last time you did something just for yourself? Harper couldn't remember. Maybe never. She agreed, and they drove north on a Friday afternoon, windows down, warm air rushing through the car. The cabin was on a small lake surrounded by pine trees, blissfully quiet. They spent the weekend swimming and reading and talking about everything they'd never had time for in between work and parenting and life. On their last night, they sat on the dock watching the sunset paint the water gold and pink. Nathan's arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest, and the silence between them was comfortable and complete. I want Benny to call me Nathan, he said suddenly. Harper lifted her head to look at him. He already does. I mean officially, not Mr. Nathan or your friend Nathan, just Nathan. As someone who's going to be around, long term. Harper's pulse quickened. How long-term are we talking? Nathan turned to face her fully, his expression serious. I'm not proposing. Not yet. But Harper, I need you to know I'm in this completely. I want to build a life with you and Benny. I want to wake up next to you every morning and help him with his homework and fight with you about stupid things like whose turn it is to do dishes. I want all of it. Harper felt tears spill over, but she was smiling. I want that too, and Nathan, when you do propose, ask Benny first. He'll want to be part of it. Nathan laughed, pulling her close. Deal. They returned to Chicago Sunday night, and Harper picked up Benny from Maggie's. Her son was full of stories about the weekend Maggie had taken him to the aquarium and let him stay up late watching movies, and he chattered the whole way home. But when they got back to the apartment, he looked around and asked the question Harper had been dreading. Mom, is Nathan going to live with us? Harper sat down beside him, choosing her words carefully. Not right now, but he's very important to me, to both of us. How would you feel if he was around more often? Benny thought about this seriously. I like Nathan. He listens when I talk about dinosaurs, even though they're probably boring to grown-ups. And he helps you when you're tired. Can he teach me chess? Harper laughed through her tears. I think he'd love that. The weeks blurred together: work, school, piano lessons, stolen moments with Nathan. Harper's life was fuller than it had ever been, almost overwhelming, but she was happier too. The constant fear that had defined her existence for 6 years had faded to background noise, manageable instead of consuming. In late August, Harper received her fall semester schedule from Berkeley. She'd be taking 4 classes: music theory 3, piano, performance, composition, and music history. The workload looked brutal, and she panicked briefly before Nathan reminded her that she didn't have to do it alone. They created a schedule. Maggie would watch Benny 2 evenings a week so Harper could study. Nathan would take him on Saturdays so Harper could focus on assignments. Lillian offered to let Harper use the community center's practice rooms whenever she needed. The support network Harper had spent years refusing to build had formed anyway, and she was finally learning to lean into it instead of fighting it. September arrived with cooler temperatures and leaves just beginning to turn. Harper started her classes, and the first few weeks were overwhelming. She'd forgotten how demanding music theory could be, how much practice performance required. But slowly she found her rhythm. And one night, working through a particularly difficult composition assignment, she realized she was enjoying it. Not just enduring, but actually loving the challenge. Nathan noticed the change. You're smiling more. Harper looked up from her laptop, surprised. Am I? Yeah, like you're remembering who you used to be. Harper saved her work and closed the laptop, considering this. I think I'm becoming someone new. Not who I was before Benny, but not just surviving anymore either. Someone in between. Nathan pulled her into his lap, his arms around her waist. I like all versions of you, but I'm glad you're finding this one. October brought the first real cold snap and news that shook Harper's world. Lillian Westbrook had a heart attack on a Tuesday morning, collapsing during a lesson. She survived but was placed in ICU, and the doctors said her teaching days were over. The community center asked Harper to take over Lillian's full schedule, 30 hours a week. Director of the piano program salary increase to $40,000 annually. It was everything Harper should want: stable income, doing work she loved, a title with respect. But it meant cutting back at the diner, possibly leaving entirely. And that job had been her anchor for nearly 2 years. It meant fully committing to teaching as a career instead of a stopgap. It meant accepting that she wasn't going back to performing. She called Nathan in tears. I don't know what to do. Nathan's response was gentle. What does your gut say? Harper thought about her students, about the 10-year-old who'd finally stopped being afraid of making mistakes, about the 6-year-old who'd discovered she could make music with her own hands. She thought about Benny growing up watching his mother teach others to love what she loved. Take the job. Then take the job. Harper gave her notice at the diner the next day. Warren was understanding, even happy for her, and Maggie hugged her so tight Harper's ribs hurt. On her last shift, the staff threw her a small party, and even Tiffany showed up, offering a grudging congratulations that almost passed for genuine. As Harper walked out of the diner for the last time, she felt both grief and relief. This place had kept her and Benny alive when they had nothing. But she didn't need it anymore. She had something better now, a future that felt possible instead of terrifying. November brought Thanksgiving and Nathan's quiet suggestion that they spend it together. Harper agreed, and they cooked dinner in her apartment, turkey that was slightly dry. Mashed potatoes. Benny helped make pie from a bakery because neither of them could bake. It was imperfect and chaotic and exactly right. After Benny fell asleep full of pie and happiness, Nathan and Harper stood at the window watching the city lights. Nathan's arms were around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "I love you," he said quietly, not for the first time, but with a weight that felt different. Harper turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I love you too, and Nathan, thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up. For pushing when I wanted to run. For showing Benny what good men look like. For everything." Nathan kissed her soft and deep, and Harper felt the last piece of her fear dissolve. This was real. This was lasting. And for the first time in her adult life, Harper let herself believe in permanence. December arrived with the first snow, and suddenly it was 1 year since that night in the park. Harper woke on Christmas Eve morning to find Nathan in her kitchen making coffee, having let himself in with the key she'd given him months ago. Benny was still asleep, and they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the snow fall outside. 1 year, Nathan said softly. Harper leaned against him. "Feels longer. Like I can't remember what life was like before." "Better or worse?" Harper considered this honestly. "Scarier, but better. Definitely better." Nathan pulled a small box from his pocket, and Harper's heart stuttered. "Nathan, it's not a ring. Just open it." Inside was a key, brass, old-fashioned, attached to a simple keychain that read "Home." Harper looked up, confused. Nathan's smile was nervous. "It's the key to my penthouse. I want you and Benny to move in." Harper's first instinct was to refuse to list all the reasons. It was too soon, too much. But then she thought about Benny's growing friendship with Nathan, about the nights they'd all fallen asleep on her couch, watching movies, about the way Nathan had become woven into the fabric of their daily lives. "That's a big step. I know, and if you're not ready, that's okay. But Harper, I want you there. I want to wake up with you every morning. I want Benny's piano practice to fill that empty apartment. I want to stop living in 2 places and just be together." Harper closed her hand around the key, feeling its weight. "What about Benny? Have you thought about what it means bringing a kid into your life permanently?" Nathan's expression was utterly serious. "I've thought about nothing else for months. I love him, Harper. Not because he's your son, but because he's an incredible kid who deserves someone who shows up. And I want to be that person. If you'll let me." Harper felt tears spill over, but she was smiling. "Okay." Nathan blinked. Yeah, but we do it right. We tell Benny together, let him help pack, make sure he knows his opinion matters." Nathan pulled her into his arms, laughing with relief. "Whatever you want." They told Benny that afternoon, the 3 of them sitting on the couch. Benny listened with wide eyes as Nathan explained that he'd like them to move to his apartment, that there was room for Benny's piano and his dinosaurs and everything important. Benny looked between them seriously. Will you be my dad? The question hung in the air, simple and enormous. Nathan glanced at Harper and she nodded permission. If that's okay with you, I'd be honored. Benny launched himself at Nathan, hugging him tight. Yes, can we get a dog? Nathan laughed, his eyes wet. We'll talk about it. They spent the rest of December packing, slowly moving Harper's modest possessions into Nathan's penthouse. The space transformed with their presence. Benny's dinosaur collection on the shelves, Harper's sheet music on the piano, photographs on the walls. It started feeling less like a hotel and more like a home. On New Year's Eve, they stood on the balcony watching fireworks explode over the city. Benny was inside asleep on the couch, and Harper leaned back against Nathan's chest, his arms around her. What are you thinking? Nathan asked. Harper smiled. That a year ago I was sitting in a park with nothing, and now I have everything. It doesn't feel real sometimes. It's real. We're real. Harper turned to face him. I know, and Nathan, I'm ready. Ready for what? Harper took his hand, placing it over her heart. For whatever comes next. Marriage, family, all of it. I'm not scared anymore. Nathan kissed her as the fireworks burst overhead, and Harper felt the final piece click into place. She'd spent 6 years fighting alone, convinced that needing anyone was weakness. But Nathan had taught her that the strongest thing she could do was let someone in. And now, standing on a balcony above Chicago with the man she loved and her son sleeping peacefully inside Harper, understood that this was what she'd been fighting for all along, not just survival but a life worth living. The snow continued to fall soft and silent, blanketing the city in fresh white. And somewhere below in Washington Park, a brass plaque on a bench marked the spot where everything had changed, where a desperate question about Santa had led to this love hope and the courage to believe in second chances.